So how is power actually won? I mean, how is it held on to, sometimes for centuries? And why, in the end, does it always seem to fall apart? You know, these aren't just questions for the history books. They're the fundamental rules that have shaped every society, including ours. We're going to dive in and explore this timeless cycle of conquest and resistance, the very patterns of power that define human history.
So, here's the path we're going to take. First, we'll start with a really simple metaphor that societies have used to make sense of power. Then, we'll look at how rule is usually won by the sword, and after that, justified with stories. From there, we'll dig into the systems built to keep control, and finally, we'll get to the inevitable pushback, what happens when the people resist.
Okay, so how do you even begin to wrap your head around something as big and complicated as a social hierarchy? Well, for centuries, people have used a simple, really powerful tool, metaphor. And one of the most lasting ones has been the image of the human body. This line right here, from a 13th century Mongolian epic, it's just so raw. It's not making a political argument. It's saying leadership is a natural necessity. Just like a body has to have a head to function, a society, it argues, has to have a ruler. It's a simple, incredibly potent way to say, hey, someone's got to be in charge. It's a simple idea, but it immediately raises a huge question, doesn't it? If a society needs a head, then who gets to be it? And why them? This is where the story of power starts to get a lot more complex and, let's be honest, a lot more violent.
Yeah, history's first and most brutal answer to that question is pretty straightforward: force. The most direct path to becoming the head has always been through conquest. Power, in its most raw form, is won at the end of a sword. It really is the oldest story in the book.
And you see this pattern everywhere. It's truly universal. In Mesoamerica, Aztec kings proved their right to rule by conquering towns, and the symbol for that was a toppled, burning temple. In 8th century India, you had dynasty after dynasty fighting for control of the rich river plains. Jump to 12th century Egypt, Saladin didn't need to give a speech to solidify his power, he just held a massive military parade. And way back in ancient Israel, the very first king, Saul, was picked for one job: to lead the fight against the Philistines. The message, over and over again, is crystal clear. Victory in battle makes you a ruler.
But here's the thing about power that's won by the sword. It's incredibly unstable, right? There's always someone else out there with a sharper sword or a bigger army. For power to actually last, for it to become what we call authority, you need something more than just brute force. You need a story. You need a justification that makes your rule feel not just real, but right.
And wow, have rulers come up with some powerful stories. On one hand, you've got the ultimate justification: divine will. You hear Moses saying, basically, this isn't me doing this is God's plan. That kind of puts you beyond question, right? On the other hand, you have a more down-to-earth justification: the loyalty of an elite military force, like the Mamluks in Egypt. The Sultan was in charge only as long as he had the respect, and maybe the fear, of his top soldiers. Two totally different narratives, but both are working to do the same thing: turn raw power into accepted authority.
And let's be clear, this need for a good story isn't just ancient history. In the modern era, it got a kind of pseudo-scientific makeover. You had theories like Orientalism that were created to frame entire cultures as uncivilized or backward. And what this did was provide a moral, even an intellectual reason for colonial powers to take over. They could argue they were doing it for the good of the people they were conquering. So the stories change, but that need to justify power, that's a constant.
All right, so you've conquered the land. You've got a great story that says you should be in charge. Now comes the really hard part. How do you actually run the place, day in, day out? This is where power stops being about dramatic battles and starts being about building durable, often invisible, systems of control.
You see, an empire isn't just an idea, it's an architecture. And these are the blueprints. First step, centralize your authority. The Roman Emperor Augustus was a master at this. He didn't rely on the powerful nobles who might challenge him. Instead, he empowered loyal men from lower ranks who owed everything to him. Second, build economic hubs. As Adam Smith pointed out, towns become these dense centers of wealth and industry, which are way easier to manage and tax. And third, you build infrastructure. The Romans, again, were geniuses at this. They built roads for their armies, but those roads became the arteries for trade, culture, and ultimately Roman control.
And in our own time, this whole architecture of control has gone digital. It's taking on this new kind of insidious form called surveillance capitalism. Now, this system doesn't need roads or forts. It works by collecting insane amounts of data about our everyday lives, our experiences, our behaviors. And that data isn't just used to predict what we'll do next, it's used to actively nudge and shape our actions and choices. It's a whole new frontier of power, built not on concrete, but on code.
But here's the twist in the story. For every single system of control, no matter how clever or how powerful, a counterforce always seems to rise up. No structure of power lasts forever, because for as long as there have been rulers, there have been people pushing back. It's the other, equally powerful pattern of history.
And what's amazing is that resistance doesn't just change politics, it actually changes people. The theorist Franz Fanon, when he was writing about anti-colonial struggles, he noticed this profound psychological shift. In the middle of a fight for freedom, the whole idea of me first just disappears. Suddenly, the vocabulary is brother, sister, friend. My survival becomes tied to your survival. It's this incredible transformation from me to us.
And this impulse to resist isn't new. It's as old as power itself. Just look at this timeline. We see it flare up again and again and again. You've got the Ionian cities revolting against the massive Persian Empire in ancient Greece. Fast forward to 1791, you have the Haitian Revolution, where enslaved people rose up and overthrew their colonial masters. In the 20th century, you see it in the form of armed revolution in China, but also in the democratic ousting of a powerful government in India. The methods are different, the places are different, but that fundamental drive to challenge power, it is a constant throughout all of human history.
So we've seen the whole cycle: conquest, justification, control, and then resistance. But what's the glue that holds it all together? What makes any system of power feel, well, normal? The ancient Greek historian Herodotus had a simple but really profound answer. Custom is king of all. At the end of the day, power doesn't rest on swords, or even laws. It rests on what we, as a society, just accept as the way things are.
And that, right there, brings us to the biggest question for our own time. If Herodotus was right, if custom is the ultimate ruler, then we have to ask ourselves, what are the unwritten rules, the accepted norms that are shaping power in our world right now? What customs are we all following without even thinking about it? That's the thought I'd like to leave you with.